Okay, The Irishman is the latest movie from Martin Scorsese and stars Robert De Niro, Al Pacino, and Joe Pesci and tells the story of Frank Sheeran and his time with Jimmy Hoffa as well as the mob. Scorsese's movies are always long and great, and this one is no different. He nails the mob genre again and really makes the 3.5 hour runtime feel more like a 2.5 hour movie. And that's not to say I wasn't bored. I would say like 85 to 90% of the movie was amazing, and those that last like 10-15% did have a few like slow scenes and ones that dragged on a little too long. So once again, De Niro does a great job in this movie, just like he did in his previous works with Scorsese, and he really made me feel for this character of Frank Sheeran and his adventures in the mob. It really sells that like common man turned into like a mob gangster and how he would fit into a world like that. By the end, I really felt for his character. And speaking of the ending is one might be one of my favorites of the year because it is really sad and emotionally resonant of everything that came before in this film that all leads to this ending, which really hits home. Al Pacino also does a great job in this movie. He's in this movie more than I thought he was, considering that he's like the big boss. I thought he was going to be kind of how De Niro was in Goodfellas, but he was a pretty fun character actually. There's these little details that you learn about him throughout the movie, and it just kind of makes him feel like, again, like a normal guy, and that there's these things that he likes, things that he doesn't like, and things that he's really passionate about, and you just kind of feel like you've been hanging out with this guy for like decades. He also doesn't feel like a guy in the mob. He feels like just a very passionate guy who cares about his job, and you really feel that in his performance. Joe Pesci, on the other hand, is not in this movie as much as I thought he was. I thought he was going to be a bigger part, but he's kind of limited to this, like, I guess, like almost 20-minute role. And when he does show up, he does do a great job. However, he's not as good as he was in like Goodfellas or anything, but he does get the job done when he's on screen. I just want to touch on some of the side characters in this movie. Some of them are kind of glossed over, which kind of makes sense because you're skipping through all these like years and decades. Like people like Jesse Plemons as Jimmy Hoffa's son. Like he doesn't really have a lot to do. He just kind of shows up in a few scenes, and that's pretty much it. And Frank's family also kind of suffers from that too. They don't really focus on them too much. They only come back to them like every once in a while, and it kind of lessens the impact of the ending, which I think if they focus a little bit more on his family, that ending would hit a little bit harder. I also want to point out Ray Romano. I thought he did a really great job as one of the lawyers that Frank is associated with. He actually was a really likable character that I enjoyed seeing on screen every time he popped up. Now for the story, I really enjoyed the story. It kind of plays out like Goodfellas. Like you're just following this guy throughout his life in the mob and following this like mob boss throughout like a few years, but this one's like throughout a few decades. And I have to say that the runtime really wasn't that like as intimidating as you think it was. That 3.5 hours isn't gonna feel like a 3.5 hour movie if you are interested. If you're just watching this movie just to be like, oh, I watched The Irishman, but like you're not gonna probably like this movie as much. Like if you like Scorsese's movies like Goodfellas and Casino and things like that, like you're gonna enjoy this movie. But to like the common person who just kind of puts this on Netflix is might be bored if they're not paying attention, because there are a lot of details that you have to focus on, and you kind of have to remember who all these people are. And for the first two acts, it's like very fast paced, kinda, and everything moves along pretty quickly. While the third act kind of slows it down because it's kind of after like everything is over, and you just kind of have these more long, like meandering scenes that I was talking about that kind of slowed it down, but it does wrap it up with a really great ending. And that ending really just makes you think about what kind of life this guy actually had and what kind of legacy he left behind because he chose this life. And the next thing is the de-aging. Most people, when they heard about this movie, they heard about the de-aging software that they were using, and I thought they did a pretty good job. They made De Niro look pretty young and old at the same, in different scenes. I think most of it worked, except for in the older scenes where people have complained about his blue eyes, that it kind of looks off, and that is gonna take your attention for a bit. But I think besides that, the software was really well executed. But yeah, I thought The Irishman was really good, but it's not up there with like his greatest movies. I think I might like this a little less than Goodfellas, but yeah, this one would be like one of my top five Scorsese movies, I don't think. But yeah, I still really enjoyed it. I would give The Irishman like an 8.7 out of 10. If you guys have seen it on Netflix, if you haven't, do check it out. I do recommend it. But remember what this kind of movie is and what you're signing up for, because this is a 3.5 hour movie and you're gonna have to be paying attention throughout. Don't watch it if you're just like watching it just to watch it, because you're gonna have to be in a certain mood to watch this movie. Like if you're expecting like a giant action movie, like wait until you are ready to watch this movie to watch this movie. But other than that, yeah, let me know if you have seen it in the comments below, and I'll see you guys in the next video.